Welcome to Let's Talk About It. I'm Sheena.
And I'm Tamara.
And you're listening to the dating season. This season focuses on women loving women dating, what it means, how to go about it, and all your questions answered. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this podcast.
Today we're talking about the differences between dating men and women. And I think this is a very interesting one, just from the point of view of how do relationships differ, if they differ at all, but if you're dating a man or a woman. And, for people who date both, how do they find it?
Well, it's an interesting but controversial topic.
It's true, because I think this is, again, one of those topics where you're painting people with broad generalizations. So, again, this isn't the kind of thing that's going to apply to every single person, every single relationship, but it's common enough that it's things which come up again and again. But remember, each person is unique and each relationship is unique.
You've also done a bit of research into actual studies that were done as opposed to just random people's ideas of what it's like, right?
Yes, I have gone and looked at that as well. There isn't a ton of studies in this area, but there are some. So I think, should we get into it?
Absolutely. So what's the first point?
The first point is that, according to a study done in 2010, men might experience feelings of love faster than women.
That's unexpected.
It is. It's the trope is that women are the ones that are always falling in love, and especially if you look at media. So it's a very interesting finding that in this specific study, they found that men got there faster than women.
Okay.
So that's one difference. So you'll probably find that if you're in a relationship with a man, he might be feeling things a little bit more deeply than you are faster.
And yet lesbians are the ones that U-Haul.
Hey, we never said it was about love with you hauling.
Well, that's also true.
In fact, a lot of the stuff that we've looked at, U-hauling comes from a lot of hormones and that honeymoon period. So it's, a lot of hormones, I think, basically, and physical reactions.
I think we also spoke about the fact that women tend to be nesters. So we want to create that home space, that safe space when we're in that phase. And that's why the U-hauling happens.
Okay.
Men falling in love faster. Why is that? Does anybody know why that is? Did they go into details?
It's one of those things where no one actually knows the reasoning behind it. They point to some theories about biology and evolutionary reasons, like men have a lot less to lose by falling in love faster, whereas women have a lot more need to be discretionary about who they choose.
Okay.
I don't know. It's one of these things, it's a theory. I mean, we might never ever know.
Well, it sort of makes sense. But men can't get pregnant, first of all. So if a woman falls in love, there's much more likely that it's going to be a lifelong commitment type of deal if it's in a heterosexual relationship where you can fall pregnant. Physically, you're more vulnerable than a man is, generally.
Yes, completely. Those might be some reasons. And another difference is, and it's connected to this first step, I'm guessing, is that men say, I love you first, or they tend to say, I love you first, which again is interesting to me because if you've watched any movie ever, that is not the case.
Yeah, which leads me to believe that media gets it wrong. How's that?
Weird.
I mean, you mean Thor is not real?
So the studies have shown that women can be more romantic in the way that they behave and think and that kind of a thing. But men are, because they fall in love faster, they will say it first. And they'll say it earlier than when the woman would say it. Because I think, again, women are probably taking a much more considered approach and are looking at all the benefits, at all the disadvantages. Is this actually love? Isn't it love? Is this someone I can see spending my life with? Whereas with the guy, it's just like, okay, I feel it, I'm all in.
Okay, that's really interesting and something I wouldn't have expected.
But on the opposite end of the spectrum, women say I love you more often.
So like frequency-wise?
Yes, so
once we're in love, we tend to express it more.
Yeah, so once it's established, women will actually say it a lot more, whereas men are like, well, I've told you I love you. They don't feel like they need to express it because it's already been done. So they will still do it, but just not as often as women. And, again, this is something where if you do have two women in a relationship, you're both going to be more verbal about it. So it's easier to know where you stand with someone because there is this verbal communication going on, and not just about your feelings towards each other but about everything.
Do men not need the constant verbal appreciation the way women do? Does it say anywhere? Or does it just not occur to them?
Research suggests that men, if they know the woman values being told that she's loved and needs it for romantic reasons, to know that he's being romantic towards her, he will make more of an effort to say it. But but if he doesn't realize that she needs that from a romantic point of view, he won't do it. And this is across cultures. It's not just in one specific culture. It's just, I think men, once something is done, it's the deal is done. They don't need, they move on and they can, like, we've been here. And I love you. I've told you I love you. Let's get on with whatever the next thing is.
That's very interesting. But I think that also ties into how we work emotionally differently.
Yes. Men and women work very differently emotionally. And a lot of women who have had relationships with men and who have had relationships with women cite that when they have relationships with men, they're doing a lot more of the emotional work for the men. They feel like men can't handle their own emotional baggage and don't know how to do it, so they end up having to do all this emotional labor. Whereas when they're with a woman, both are taking care of the emotional labor, so there's a lot less onus on one person to be doing it all.
I think that's accurate based on the conversations I've had with heterosexual women in marriages with men. They say that their partners, if they're going through some kind of emotional thing, through therapy, through whatever it is that they're using, the tools that they're using to help them understand their emotional space, is like stuff that we go through when we're very young. And it's this big revelation for these 30-something-year-old guys.
It'd be interesting to see, what actually causes this. Is it something about being inherently male, or is it just about the way guys are brought up? And that whole thing of boys don't cry? Is it a result of that?
I think it's definitely partly that. It's this kind of male culture, and it's both women and men push boys into, oh, you fell, just get up, it's fine. You'll be fine.
Yes.
Oh, somebody was nasty to you at school. Oh, honestly, it's fine, just move on. So they push away these feelings, they bury it, and then they don't actually know how to deal with it when bigger stuff down the road comes and hurts them.
Yes. As a result of this, women in relationships with men find themselves having to take on a lot of that emotional stuff. But on the opposite end, men tend to be have a lot less maintenance attached to them than women do. So women who are in relationships with women find that their relationships are a little bit more high maintenance, whereas with men, while there's the emotional work, it's not as high maintenance.
I can believe that too. We are inherently, yes, we talk more, but that doesn't necessarily mean we understand always what's going on.
Yeah, no, completely. So, so what I'm finding from this is that whether you're dating men or women, it's work.
Well, I think that that's accurate though, because you're dating a person, a whole human being with a lifetime of experiences and feelings and baggage, and you come with your own lifetime of experiences and baggage and feelings and hormones. Never underestimate the power of hormones.
I hate the power of hormones. It's like, seriously, you sometimes feel that you don't have a brain, that you're just this bag of meat being led by hormones. I hate it.
I mean, I think that's pretty accurate, hey?
It's horrible though, because it takes away your autonomy. It just makes you feel like you're not a person, you're just some sort of pre-programmed robot.
I think if you understand what is hormones versus what is actually coming from baggage, from where you're at emotionally, financially, whatever it is that's causing the problem, I think then you can actually work through it. Even if you are feeling all the things, you can still kind of go, okay, I'm feeling all the things, but this is why. But the problem is that us human beings, we're not equipped with that. Nobody teaches you the EQ stuff, ever. You have to go on a long, hard journey to discover this.
I know, it's actually quite messed up because you have all these adults who are in some sort of therapy or some sort of life finding journey to try like figure out who they are and how they feel about things. And it's all because as children, no one is taught how to actually deal with their emotions and how to figure out who they are at that point. It's all, toe the line, fit into this box, don't cry, be a good girl, whatever it is. To the point where you have grown-ups who even who have been brought up in what you'd think of as an idyllic childhood are still needing therapy.
Thank you for being an awesome listener and supporting Tilt, the channel that brings you all the podcasts you want to hear. You're listening to Tilt. Find more podcasts on thelesbiantalkshow.com. Alright, so what's the next point?
Okay, so the next point is that men are more likely to feel like their love isn't being reciprocated than someone who's in a relationship with a woman. This completely makes sense. If they're feeling that they're in love much faster than their partner, then it would make sense that they're not feeling reciprocated. Also, another reason that could lead to this is that men don't communicate as much verbally as women do. So in a lesbian relationship, you might have one woman feeling like she's not being loved, but you have a conversation about it, or you verbalize it in some way. Whereas with a man, they internalize it, they don't talk about it, and they just don't feel like they're being reciprocated.
Interesting. This comes back to the emotional, not knowing how to do the emotional work as well.
Completely.
Because then you also don't know how to verbalize what you need.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's also, like, researchers found that for men overperceiving a woman's sexual interest in them is linked to them feeling like they're in love. So if they think a woman is sexually interested in them, they're more likely to feel like they're in love with this person. So, I mean, a woman, displaying sexual interest doesn't necessarily mean that she's in love. It's just that, she wants to have sex. So this might be another reason as to why, there is this unrequited love, because he's feeling what he thinks is love and she's feeling lust. So there's never going to be this meeting of the hearts.
I wonder if this also then traces back to the inability to do the emotional work. Is it really love, or is lust just misrepresented in his brain?
Completely. Like, men think very differently to women. Men tend to have a much easier go of the world in general. Not for all men, but in general.
That's actually an interesting point, that men's outlook on the world could also be as a result of how they experience the world. So they never have to do some of the backwards and forwards that women have to do to get to the same point.
Yeah, I think women second guess themselves a lot more than men do, because we're frankly socialized to do that. So for women, you're constantly second guessing. So whether you love someone or would they even be interested in me? Whereas men are like, oh, I like her, I'm in love with her. And maybe it never even occurs to them that, no, she's not interested in you, or she's not interested in you in that way.
I mean, it's interesting. One of the most frustrating things for me about being in a lesbian relationship, sorry wife, but this is a frustration with me, is that you'll say one thing, and there's all this kind of underlying stuff you have to navigate through, because the other woman, the person you've said it to, thinks you actually mean something completely different when what you've said is X. She thinks you mean Y.
I think women are a lot less taking something at face value, whereas men do take things at face value. So women are a lot more high maintenance in that way. It's like, you can't just take it that when you say X, you mean just X, and there's not a whole lot of other emotional stuff coming with it. And sometimes it doesn't have to do anything to do with the other person. It's just, your own experiences, whatever it is, that are tainting it.
But it is a universal woman thing that there's almost like double speak. And so, unless you're actually a woman, understanding doublespeak is difficult. And I think this is why men are like, I don't understand women at all.
No, completely. I mean, that 90s movie.
Which movie?
I think it's called What Women Want.
I don't really remember, but yeah.
I don't know, it was basically the whole plot of a movie where it's like, for whatever reason, he can hear her thoughts. I can't even remember how the movie went, but basically it was what she said versus what she was actually thinking.
But you well versed in that if you're a woman, generally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't like that movie much.
No, it wasn't great. It really wasn't. It's a little bit like misogynist and stuff. But, it's a well-known thing that, sometimes what you're saying is either not what you're saying or it is what you're saying and someone's interpreting it differently.
Absolutely, which makes it really difficult sometimes with relationships with women.
Completely. But you know what's another thing that's really, really, really difficult about having a relationship with a woman? Well, so I've been told. They steal your clothes.
That never happens with us.
Not really. We're also two completely different heights and two different styles. But apparently for some women who date women, that is a big difference than when you date men, is that women tend to steal your clothes.
Well, I know you keep trying to steal some of my t-shirts that are all nicely worn in and soft.
Well, they do make, perfect PJs, but,
So there are significant differences emotionally and interestingly very much on the emotional sort of spectrum between dating men and women. I think there's also a lot of physical differences. I've heard, I don't have personal experience with this, but I've heard that men are, their skin is harder, they're softer, we smell nicer. All that stuff. But I didn't want to cover all the sort of typical stuff in this podcast. So I think you did well with your research. High five, wife.
Look, I think, whether you're dating men or women or you date both, there are going to be some differences. But I think ultimately, neither one is better than the other. They're just a little bit different. And they both have their significance, certain ways where it's a little bit easier. With men, you don't necessarily get that sort of double speak. With women, you don't have to deal with taking on emotional baggage.
I think either way, the only thing that really matters is what makes you happy. Who makes you happy?
Completely.
I don't think any relationship is perfect, and I don't think dating any particular gender is perfect. I just think you need to know that it is different.
I think it's also an interesting view of what you can learn about different types of people and how to, if you are having issues in your relationship or you feel like things are not very smooth in one area, it's helpful to understand that people can behave in different ways and do things in different ways. And even if you are dating a woman and she doesn't say, I love you as much as you would like to, maybe it's because she's got a very sort of male-centric way of thinking about it. She's already told you once that she loves you and doesn't know that it's important for you to hear it more often. So maybe discuss it.
But maybe she buys you lots of gifts, and that comes back to the love languages, which we discussed in our relationships podcast series.
Yes.
That's all for this episode. You're listening to Let's Talk About It. I'm Sheena.
And I'm Tamara, and we're wishing you luck on your next date.
Absolutely, go out there and knock your socks off. If you enjoy this podcast, please make sure to rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. It helps other queer women find this show.
We love you and we appreciate it if you share this podcast with your friends. We'd like to get as many people listening to this channel as possible, and that not only means that we're able to continue doing this, but it means that we're reaching out more people and making people more comfortable being out.
Absolutely, queer content is important. Help us make it and help us grow.
Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.